Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the 2021 Living Streets Walking Summit. Thank you for joining us. We're delighted that everybody could attend for another virtual event where we're going to be discussing the few streets. Before we start, I'm going to pass you over to our organiser, Catherine Slater, who will talk you through the tech so that we can make sure everything runs smoothly for the morning. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Stuart. Oh, terrible feedback. Thanks for that. My laptop was live. So I just want to go through the technology of using AirMeet. You can see on the right-hand side, you've got the chat function that you can use to talk to all delegates in the room. You can see who else is in the room by looking at the attendees tab, also on the top right. You can check out the sessions that are coming up on the top right also by clicking on the sessions tab, and then you can explore the rest of the sessions, who's speaking, and so on. To send a chat to the whole of the group, this use live chat, but you can also use direct messages by clicking on any attendee's icon and sending a direct message to them. In a session, when somebody is presenting, you can make their presentation screen by clicking on the expand icon on the top right of the presentation, and you can close it down again by clicking on the same icon. To ask a question when we're in session, then you can click on the questions tab and pop your question in the box. And if someone else posts a question that you really think is very important, it's a burning question, you really like it, then you can upvote it, and the chair will be able to see which is popular questions. One important thing, though, please don't put your questions for the speakers in the chat, because they're two separate feeds and we might miss it. Just on, again, on questions, we can upvote them and see which are the most popular ones. Sorry, I missed that one. That previous icon was about the raising hands function, which you can raise your hand and be invited onto screen to ask your question live. And this particular icon at the bottom of your screen enables you to open captioning. Bear in mind it's an automated service that the platform provides, so it can be a bit hit or miss, but it might be of assistance to you. When speakers are presenting, you can use the emojis button and to show your appreciation. You can send clapping hands and light bulb moments and smiley faces rising up the screen. And in the break, if you've not done so already, you can go into the lounge and take a seat and network with your fellow participants. You just have to wait till someone else joins your table, and then a box will appear to enable you to pop your cameras and microphones on to start chatting. And that's it for me. I'll hand back to Stuart.
Okay, thank you very much, Catherine. Yep, please, people do use the technology that's available. It's an interesting platform, and there's opportunities to network during the break, so I deliberately chose it for that purpose. So please do that. And this is the whole point of today, is to bring everybody together, even though we're still slightly socially distanced. But before I start, it has been obviously a really challenging year for a lot of reasons. But for walking and for the sector, it was a particular blow in March when we lost Ian Finlay, who, to be honest, is just a bit of a legend. And he certainly supported Living Street, supported a lot of other organisations. And one of the things Ian did at all these sort of conferences, and this is how people's memories live on, is he was all about walking, he was all about movement, and he practiced what he preached, and he always asked people events such as this to stand up and take a few steps and get active. So I'm going to ask you just to do that for just a second. Maybe just stand up, take 10 steps, get your circulation going, because we're all sitting around doing too much Zoom stuff. So I'm going to do it and look daft, and if everybody else is enjoying, that's going to be great. I'm just a headless person now, but yeah, if everybody does that, that would be a good thing just to warm us all up, and just remember movement, and remember Ian, and hopefully that's a tradition that we can continue. I won't ask everybody else to do it. The other thing we could get people to do is to go down onto your knees and actually look at the world from the perspective of a different height, because actually we're talking about young people, especially people at younger ages, actually see the world at a very different height. And this is something I learned from a psychologist at the Walk 21 event a couple of years ago. So just the whole event is about trying to get people to look at streets in a different way, and hopefully from the perspective of children. Before I really start, I want to just briefly talk, before we get onto the main agenda, and it's about young people, I want to briefly talk about other projects. There's a bit of activity in my house, so I want to briefly talk about some of the other things we've worked on this year. We've done a lot of work on older people, and we're just finishing up with older people and older people's groups. We're just finishing up some projects that were funded by the National Lottery and Paths for All via the Smart Choices, Smart Places Fund. These projects aren't quite ready for us to present today, but there is going to be quite a lot of material, so please look out for that. I think there's a series of videos we're launching called Small Steps in the next few months. So if you're interested in that type of, please check it out. We've also been able to do a lot of street audits despite the lockdown, although we've been doing most of the work virtually. That's been taken from my colleague Robert Wheatman, using funds from Transport Scotland and Cycling Scotland. So that's continued to be out and about. So and that project will hopefully continue. So we still have been out and about communities, and we have lots of evidence about what's gone there. We actually, right at the start of the year, launched one of our biggest and most complicated street audit projects, which was a review of the environment between Waverley and the Scottish Waverley Station and the Scottish Parliament, and that's all up on our website. But it does show you actually right outside our Parliament where a whole new set of MSPs are going to be. Hopefully we'll be starting new jobs quite soon. The actual walk-in isn't very good, which is not, and it's especially not good for anybody with disabilities. So that's something we would hopefully want to follow up, and we're very excited to hear that Daisy Narayan will be taking forward work in Edinburgh. So hopefully we can follow up on that report. And the last thing is, if you haven't seen this, there is a video about street clutter, and you won't believe this, but it is actually really, really exciting. It's a really significant issue, and that was thanks to the Smarter Choices programme and Edinburgh City Council. And the work was, I can't take much credit for it. It was led by Living Streets Edinburgh Group, but it's actually to removing some of that clutter off Edinburgh streets through the Spaces for Everyone campaign. So these are just some examples of what's been going on during lockdown. I'll get back to the main agenda, really, which, as I say, it's overdue to talk about young people. It is our biggest programme in terms of what we deliver and the partners we work with. We've working across about 21 local authority partners, either through our WOW programme or through Walk to School Week. And there's still a chance to get, for anyone who's not involved, to get involved in that. At the moment, I believe we will be, as we go into May, we'll be working with about 27,000 school pupils. And that's quite low because of what's happened in the last year. So we're looking to build that back up. And today is a really good day to start thinking about this stuff, because I think all the schools are actually back as of yesterday, which is fantastic. So I'm just going to set the scene slightly with, if my screen, I'm going to be the first to test the screen sharing on this platform. So we'll just see if this works. Well, it's not worked yet. So, just some thoughts for today. This the slide you're seeing is from a Scottish Government resource, which I still recommend everybody uses. Which I recommend everybody uses in terms of behaviour change. And what I wanted to, we'll be talking about both some infrastructure stuff, but I don't want to dominate that. And I think this is the point about walking. Walking isn't about stuff; it is a movement, and it is about people. And that's slightly different from cycling. You don't need quite the same level of infrastructure, or the same amount of kit. You can just go out and do it. But we do need to make it easier for people to walk, and we especially need to make it easier for younger people to walk. And that's also thinking about some of the beliefs around about walking and some of the social issues around about walking. So hopefully we'll cover that today. Just looking at some of the issues that are out there. Just a little bit of the backdrop. This is what you find in the media, and it's a couple of things involving young people. That was an advert that was drawn by Audi, but it was kind of using children to promote cars, making things look acceptable, and that is kind of the reality. It's a very horrific incident last year, in terms of a family destroyed basically because of our transport system not being a safe system, and there's a total lack of self-awareness on that front page. As you can see at the top, if you're eagle-eyed, it's talking about motorists getting refunds on their parking. And on the same front page. So that just shows you the sort of lack of awareness about what cars are doing to our society. This was last week, actually. I met Lee Craigie, and just before I met her, I noticed that this is the access to the Royal Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh, which we couldn't actually get into because it was booked out, very busy with families, and the pedestrian crossing had been knocked out. So there's a family trying to navigate across that, and you can see they're particularly happy in that picture, and the parents are obviously. So that's the experience of our streets, and this is what we end up with. Kids don't have the freedom. Parents don't trust streets because of the way they're designed, because of the level of traffic, and we need to sort of break that down. So hopefully we'll cover some of those issues. And this is something interesting. I found this picture. This is a play street in Leith from about 1960. I believe the picture was taken. A sensational photo from the archives that I found. And I went back there this morning to see what's there. And the irony of irony is it is a car park, and it's not only any old car park, it's a car park for an outdoor store which is selling kit to get kids to go outdoors. So there you go. That's 60 years of progress for you, everybody. So again, we've got to do better than that. And unfortunately, we're not doing very well with street design at the moment. This is a brand new development. This is actually where my sister lives, just outside Edinburgh. That's a street that was built in November this year. The people moved into these houses. And there's a 4-year-old in the middle, is my nephew. And you can see, it's a very different experience from what these kids had in Leith back in the 1960s, where they had the freedom of the street. You can see that these kids are not comfortable because they're still looking for traffic, and the monoblock there doesn't quite cut it. And if we want to build back better, it is all about economies, and it's all about building on actually people have been walking around their neighbourhoods, and the 20-minute neighbourhood thing has come alive, but we need to make that real. So that's quite important. But the good news is actually there's still quite a lot of walkable infrastructure in our communities that we can build on. Certainly primary schools, we haven't quite centralised them all yet, and we need to stop that if where it's planned. It's still a little bit tricky to get to high schools, and that might be a bit more where SAG comes into it. But yeah, communities are still quite walkable despite the amount of traffic in them. So underneath all that, if we can do some improvements, I think the future is quite bright. I'll stop there, and hopefully that set the scene a little bit, and pass on to Lee Craigie, who will further set the scene in terms of movement in children and why that's so important to our society. Over to you, Lee.
Thanks very much, Stuart, and thanks everyone so much for inviting me along this morning, because supporting the work of Living Streets in Scotland is really not an onerous thing for me to do. I believe wholeheartedly in the importance of shaping our public spaces around the health and well-being of people on our planet. I'm passionate about how in doing so we really effectively close the inequalities gap too. So although it's tempting, I'm not going to stand here today, and I am standing. Thank you, Ian, who taught me that, and I'm going to urge all of you to join me in standing. I'm not going to stand here and wax lyrical about the silver threads of lockdown, where we all reclaimed our streets from cars and families fell in love with each other and nature while walking in perfect harmony. That felt like ages ago. We're in a different phase now. But I'm also not going to recite a list of all the excellent infrastructure projects happening across Scotland as a result of Spaces for People money, nor am I going to offer the projected health, environmental and economic benefits associated with them. There's people in this conference that already know that, and Stuart could probably talk about those much better than me. I'm not even going to describe to you the ambitious School Streets programme being rolled out in Glasgow. You can hear that from the horse's mouth later on today. Anna Richardson's with us. Or I'm not going to talk about the road reallocation on high streets all over the country that is reprioritising people not in cars. I'd like to share with you the optimism I feel around the new National Transport Strategy, Strategic Transport Projects Review, and celebrate the Scottish Government's announcement of increased funding for a summer of play this year, but I won't. And do you know why? Because as adults, we're all a bit blinded by the things we should do, and we're so fixated on problem solving. No, this gathering is a celebration of the really important stuff, creating the conditions for happiness. I don't know about you, but I am tired. I've been taking myself so seriously lately. I'm shouldering the weight of the world, and I've been letting everything be my problem to solve. When I've not been living in the past with my regrets, I've been worrying and obsessing about what the future might hold, probably like everybody else at this difficult time. I've been sacrificing my precious time and energy to achieve things and not leaving enough room to just be in the moment, with a book, my bike, with nature, really truly with the people that I love. But young children don't forget to do that. And that's why we have so much to learn from them. And I don't just mean consulting them on what our public realm should look like, but also how we approach new challenges with curiosity and creativity. Children don't move, speak, or think in a straight line. They're not world weary yet. Their brains are free of the deep grooves that form from set ways of thinking. As adults, we've spent a lifetime sticking rigidly to the way things have always been and assuming our greater years mean greater wisdom. Adults use words like naive and immature to describe our children, and then we watch mindfulness tutorials on YouTube and try and capture what our children do naturally. Be present, curious, accepting, and non-judgmental. There's an excellent report that Cycling Scotland recently published called Changing Gears that Children's Scotland co-created with young people to explore views on cycling and road safety. 9 young people came together to co-design an activity pack that was then rolled out to 6 primary schools across Scotland. 300 pupils used a variety of creative research methods to identify how cycling made them feel and identify the barriers to participation so that the National Cycle Training Programme, Bikeability, might be made better. Overwhelmingly, these pupils said they liked cycling. They said it was a fun and sociable thing to do. And I totally agree. Any physical activity outside in a green space with my mates makes me feel great too. But the report also cited that one of the main reasons children cycled was because it was healthy. And that reason jarred with me a wee bit. Children didn't say it made them feel good, they said it was healthy. But surely healthy is a goal, a target, something to attain. It's an admirable one, and one that we as policymakers, parents and project workers should be aiming for. But is being healthy really a primary motivating factor for a 6-year-old? Maybe it is, but it just sounds like an older voice talking to me. Next, pupils offered up what barriers they face to cycling. Oh, aside from the really real and obvious ones about access to bikes and not being inspiring places to ride nearby, other reasons were nearly entirely focused on safety concerns. I don't doubt that it must feel doubly scary when you're really wee, being passed too close by a car while out walking or riding. But I just couldn't help wonder how those seeds of fear became planted in those young minds. Was it from a close pass from a car? Or was it transferred fear from well-meaning, caring adults who pass on fear in order to protect the children they love? And is it this same love and care that motivates adults, and I include myself in this, to turn unstructured playtime into learning opportunities? The amount of time that children spent unstructured free play today is in decline. Common reasons for this decline include safety concerns, stranger danger, crime, traffic, increased time spent in school, a rising belief that childhood is a time for resume building, and an overemphasis on structured activities, sports and clubs. Leah Carson, a professor of urban geographies at the University of Amsterdam, argues that this change has transformed children from active participants to backseat children who are passively escorted from structured activity to the next by their parents. The tension between a parent's desire for control and a child's desire for freedom has been playing out for thousands of years. But Carson feels that today's parents seem to be gripping tighter than at any time in the recent past. And yet research suggests that children should experience twice as much unstructured time as structured play experiences. Unstructured play, that's the magical stuff that happens in our streets, parks and gardens when adults aren't interfering and supervising. This is the value of creating these safe spaces, so the next generation can be left alone to develop an understanding of the world on their own terms. On the 8th of October last year, a play participatory lab was organised during the European Week of Regions and Cities to involve policymakers and urban practitioners in co-designing measures to promote a playful policy approach aimed at transforming urban environments into great places to live. They were asked to close their eyes and visualise their idea of a playful city. What did they hear? What did they feel? What was visible? Who was visible? What were they doing? It was imagined that in the ideal playful city, people would be better able to connect with each other. Elderly people with children, migrants with locals, the relationship between parents and children would be cemented by playing together. Public transport, pedestrians, people using wheels would be favoured over cars. Streets, squares and all urban public spaces would be open for play 24/7 and designed as multifunctional spaces. Physical activities and leisure would be enhanced by all the nature widely present in this ideal city. Children and young people would keep the city alive. The playful city would break out of the playground. Denise Cahill summarised the vision of the city shaped by play beautifully. She said, "Don't try to direct play, just make the space playful. People need colours, nature, safety and comfortable spaces where staying together for play, for sharing ideas and for keeping alive the creativity we need to continue imagining a better future." What was learned from this experience was that people don't need explanation about where and how they might play. They simply needed more public spaces that were car-free and open for play for both children and adults. In southern Germany, Switzerland and Austria, play streets are widely used, like the one that Stuart just referred to in Leith. Children were allowed to walk, children are allowed to play everywhere. There's a legal speed limit walking pace, which is about approximately 20 kilometres per hour. Pedestrians have priority. Cyclists, cars, vans and lorries are guests on these streets. They must move at the speed of the slowest road user. This makes so much sense while surrounded by the political and practical battle that we have here in Scotland in establishing 20 mile per hour as our default speed limit in built-up areas. Sorry, however hard I try, I can't help slip into problem-solving mode. Let's try something different. In Buddhist meditation practice, cultivating a child's mind or beginner's mind is about freeing ourselves of expectation and opinion. Rachel Carson, the great naturalist, described a child's world as fresh and new, beautiful, full of wonder and excitement. She says, "It is our misfortune that for most of us, that clear-eyed vision, that true instinct of what is beautiful and awe-inspiring is dimmed and even lost before we reach adulthood. What a shame." In researching this presentation, I googled child's mind, and what came up on my search were scholarly articles on children's brain development or practices we can encourage in our children to help them feel more focused and calm. I thought that spoke volumes about what we truly value. The role of Active Nation Commissioner was devised so that someone independent of government might offer a different perspective to the usual government processes, to challenge the way things have always been done in the past, and to offer support for innovative ideas and creative collaboration. But bringing that kind of energy needs a receptive playmate. Play might be the answer to how anything new comes about, but unstructured play between grown-ups, that takes a lot of unlearning to engage in. Talk about fear. That said, I have two very real and relevant objectives that I'm working towards in my remaining time in post. One, supporting an active school run, crack this nut in a neighbourhood and the high school will follow. Two, a commitment to encourage the excellent, hard-working government officials and CEOs I work closely with to let go of what they think they know and join me for a play in the metaphorical street. We all need a break from adulthood from time to time so that we might find the simple pleasures that were once so obvious to us as kids. In these ways, we might just manage to make the changes our minds, bodies and planet so desperately need. So dance, skip, stop and see the detail, ask silly questions, believe in unicorns, open up with a smile, never pass up the opportunity to belly laugh and dream beyond your wildest dreams. Let your childlike imagination run wild and give yourself the chance to achieve something great. If we want our children to move mountains, we must first let them out of their chairs. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Lee. I'm going to now hand over to Chris Thompson, who is the manager of all schools projects in Scotland, and I think it's been with us for nearly a decade actually in terms of building up that portfolio of what Chris doesn't know about schools isn't worth knowing. So I'll pass over to Chris to share that knowledge.
Thank you, Stuart. It's gone in a flash, I can say. Stuart, thanks. Living Streets Aunt Joe Wicks there with our early morning workout. And thank you, Lee, as well. Always inspiring words to follow on. Hopefully I can take forward some of that joy of movement that you've captured there in what I'm going to say this morning. So I'm going to focus briefly on school streets and what we're doing to support school streets at Living Streets, and also just speak a little bit more about the wider programme through WOW and other things that we offer. I'm going to start by just quoting Tom Foley, one of our founders, back in 1931, and just to show, as Stuart was showing in some of those slides, things do and don't move on in many ways. And the words he said then: "We are not anti-car, but by a gradual and subtle process, the eviction of the pedestrian from our roads and streets proceeds. Streets are first and foremost for people." And that's elegant and simple. And what we're trying to do here through so many ways is just reclaim a space that for thousands and thousands of years was a space for people to move around in. And then for a relatively short time, we've managed to turn that on its head and allow bits of metal to take over the place and people to be shifted down the agenda. In a nutshell, pretty much sums it up with school streets. I'm going to now go to sharing. So I'm going to attempt two things here: to share, and then we're going to have a bit of video later as well. So let's see if the technology bears with us on this. Hopefully you can see a picture there. And that is, I think, in a picture where we want to be. They do say never work with children, animals, or giant orange feet. I think that proves that it can sometimes go okay. That's St John's Primary in Edinburgh, and that was one of the very early adopters. I don't know if anyone's with us from Edinburgh this morning, but they'll probably recognise that street. And it sums up what Lee was saying there, the joy of movement. There you got a street reclaimed, albeit for photo opportunity, but the fact of the matter was there were children walking about in that street in a way that you wouldn't normally see because the traffic was prevented from coming through, and it still is. And that's kind of the end game, if you like. That's where you get to if you go through the program of re-evaluating streets, of encouraging active travel, and of bringing it together. And to look at Stuart's slide from earlier, the one about behaviour change, well, that's an important part of this because there's a lot of slack in the system in terms of culture and where we sort of prioritise around active travel as well. So let's go through just a couple of quick slides here and break this down. How can you get to that stage where you've got a street fit for walking in? And by a street fit for walking, I mean literally the street, not just the bits at the edge that you know, given graciously away to pedestrians. First of all, value what you want to value, and pedestrians aren't generally valued. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is, and the big one is, they're invisible because lots of modes, particularly motorised modes, have got things go with them. You've got to park a car at the end of it. You need a parking space. That costs money. It has a value. It costs an awful lot, but it's almost a positive because suddenly someone is counting it. And to be fair, even cycling has a bit of kit to go with it, but walking is almost completely neutral. There's nothing. Someone turns up, and maybe if you're lucky, they might ask for a peg to hang their coat on. But aside from that, it's relatively. It doesn't make much of an intrusion. So value it and count it. And one of the things in Edinburgh that happened very early on with their consultation phase was they worked with us to establish a network of pedestrian counters out and look at getting the data in to support what was then going to be, through a committee process, the programme of school streets. And you'll see an example there of the data. And you'll see at the bottom of the screen, anyone sharp-eyed, there is actually a link to the full report. You can have a look at that and see how you can get more data around pedestrians and value it too. Don't go to it now, but maybe for later. And then just at the bottom there, wow. Now this is the behaviour change side of things. I'm just going to take a little interlude to show you how that fits in, because it's important in terms of data, because one of the ways we work with WOW incidentally, many years ago, used to be called Walk Once a Week. I know a lot of people who still call it that, and I have much respect. Wow, my screen stopped sharing there. That's amazing. I don't know if someone just switched that off for me, but I'm going to put it back on again, if that's all right. Maybe that was Catherine. Were you getting ready for the video? Oh. Right, okay. I will just wait while the cogs whirl around. Catherine, if you're going to run the video, that's okay. You can just hold fire for a second. No, I cannot see or hear anything now, so perhaps someone can just...
Hi, Chris. I think your connection might be a little bit dodgy. Would you like me to play the video now?
Oh, now would be good. Oh, well, actually, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you fine.
As long as you
yes.
can hear me, you're not missing out on anything. I will just carry speaking, and I'll just narrate what you would have been seeing, okay? And then if we can cut to the video in just a second, if that's all right.
Sure, absolutely.
So what I was saying, and now with no pictures as well, but we will, was that through WOW, what we encourage there is a change in behaviour. The critical piece of this is to say, you know, the priority has been around maybe driving to school, but let's try and redress that. And for nearly 20 years now, we've been sorting through recording and rewarding journeys. And the reward is a little badge, which I would have been showing you, but you'll just have to guess what that looks like. And the badge comes if enough walks or cycles or other active travel is achieved. And what I'll do is, if you want to play the video in now, this shows how we adapted that through lockdown, and the name that we use, Travel Tracker, ordinarily became the WOW Activity Tracker, because we included other modes as well. And Fiona from Daily Mile is going to be talking shortly, and she'll mention that I'm sure that through that we managed to link up and partner in terms of supporting trips that weren't just to school but were in general. And again, that joy of movement across with no boundaries. So if you want to run that video in, if you can, for us, Catherine, and I'll see if I can reset something here in the meantime.
Hello, we're Living Streets, the UK charity which runs the Walk to School project. We've launched the WOW Activity Tracker to help children stay active, whether in school or learning at home.
The Activity Tracker allows children to log their daily physical activity, whether that's a walk with family or exercising at home. Children who meet the level of activity set by school will receive a monthly reward.
To use the WOW Activity Tracker at home, you will need a 3-word classroom access code, available from the school or class teacher. Once you have this code, navigate to traveltracker.org.uk on your computer or mobile device and select Classroom Login.
Once you are logged in, select the class and pupil name or icon for which you would like to record an activity. You will see a selection of activities and travel modes to choose from, colour-coded for at home or school use.
Select the option that best fits for activities completed that day, and if it's been a quiet one, then the Sofa Day button is available so that pupils can still record and engage with the tracker. When an activity has been recorded, the icon will be greyed out in the class list and the activity choice will be added.
And that's it. Simple. Log in and record activities as often as you can, and please keep an eye out for monthly rewards and digital incentives as the programme continues.
Thanks for watching this video, and we hope you enjoy using the WOW Activity Tracker, brought to you by Living Streets.
Thank you, Catherine. Hopefully that played out okay for everybody. I'm still looking at a whirling screen here. So provided you can hear me, Catherine, if you could run in the slides from slide 4 for me, that would be ideal, please. Okay. I don't know if anyone can see that, and if you can't, I'll narrate.
Yeah, I just give me a second.
That's okay. I'll narrate it in such a way that it works without, if not. So the slide that you would have been seeing, or you may see shortly, just illustrates how a school street closure can work. And what you heard there was how we'd used the WOW Activity Tracker very effectively during lockdown, and still seeing thousands of journeys recorded on that at home, and then working back to school. Which stood us in very good stead for a nice sort of bounce back into what is the reopening of schools now. Great, and there's a slide, I can actually see that now, good. So that slide, we're looking just at the school street side of it, and this is complementary, so you've got the behaviour change going, you're encouraging journeys, but then you get to the point where you can't unlock the journeys any further. There's just not, the infrastructure there. And here's a couple of examples you can hear from Murray Council later on. That picture at the top left there is taken from one of their school streets, and that one is from Garnet Bank, just in central Glasgow there. And 2 very good examples of how school streets can be reclaimed. 4 quick bullets there against that to say how you can go about that. We looked at research, get the data in, make the case, value the pedestrians. The fact that there's no one walking in the streets at the moment means nothing. It just means that you've got, subdued demand. You can't walk in what's not available. Get that data together. Then the consultation is very, very important. Speak to everybody. You want to hear a wide range of opinions, but also you don't want to just be hearing the noisiest opinions, and that's off face with there will be those who can put their voices forward very clearly. Listen to everyone. It's important to put it as a trial, because I think that way you can see if there's anything needs changing, but you can also slightly take the heat out of it being a sort of anti-car feature. Once things have happened, I've been really surprised how much people's opinions turn around once they see the street reclaimed in a different way, and once they see that you can actually do something with this huge area of tarmac. As you'll see there at Garnet Bank, they've not got a huge playground. They managed to have a bring and buy sale on it, and that's great. You can celebrate something else and then obviously evaluate it. And I think the plan then is that you can, having shown success and showing that things can happen, that hitherto wouldn't have been thought of, you can then make it mainstream. And like I said at the very beginning, this isn't something revolutionary, because if you look at these areas, particularly around schools and places, they were places dominated by people not that very long ago. So if you could just move us on a slide there. Very quickly, this one does play to the joy of movement, I believe. Yes, do dance about it. Do make it fun. The worst thing is to close a street and then do nothing with it, because tumbleweed blowing through it kind of illustrates the argument, well, no one actually wanted to do anything here. So there's some very good examples of, in fact, there is one, there's Strider, our mascot, dancing in the street in celebration. So celebrate what you've got, and people will come and do other things with it. And the final slide there, if you will. There's lots of info, as you'd expect. You can have a look around at your leisure and see those without my computer crashing in the middle of them. I think a nice point to finish with there, and the picture at the top right of that slide, is that it's people power that makes this work, and that's at all levels. You need the pupils involved, you need the teachers, you need the school, and you need the community involved. And what better way to illustrate that and than in Edinburgh with no inch gran. I don't think that's the gran in the picture, but that is her sign in the background. And if anyone from Edinburgh Council is on the call, they'll be able to verify this later. But one of the school street closures there really took a sort of jump up when one of the local grants decided it wasn't quite working as well as she wanted it to. And somehow she got hold of this huge 6-foot motorway no entry sign, which was kept in the bushes nearby, and dragged out in the morning into the middle of the road, just to ensure that things were going smoothly every day. So that kind of level of community engagement, I think, whilst we might not necessarily say do it that way, but it certainly illustrates the point that this is about, making streets places that people are proud of and take a responsibility for. So apologies for any of the technical hitches there. That's it from me. I will hand back to Stuart.
Thank you, Chris. Hopefully everybody got that. I think we just about got through the technical issues there. Okay, I'm delighted to now hand over to Paterson to talk about Daily Mile and where that fits in. Daily Mile actually is a Scottish invention, I believe, and we are a kind of world leader in terms of integrating walking into the school day, and Fiona's joined the program. So Fiona's joined the program. We've really enjoyed working with her in terms of how we can collaborate with what we're doing, kind of outside the school. So I'll hand over to Fiona.
Thanks very much, Stuart. I'm just going to try and share my screen. Sorry, just 2 seconds, folks. Can everyone see that okay?
Yes, that's looking good, Fiona.
Great. Thought I'd better just double check before I have any technical issues. So good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for having me here today to present around the Daily Mile Nation. I'm Fiona Patterson. I'm the Programme Manager for Scotland, and I started my role on the 6th of July this year. So I just wanted to give a bit of background and context to the Daily Mile for those that haven't been aren't aware of it. So the Daily Mile is a simple social physical activity, and it's 15 minutes. People are most likely to be aware of it within school curriculum time, and it really is a choice thing for children. I think there's a preconception around Daily Mile tracks and children having to run a mile, but really what all it is children getting out in the fresh air and being active for 15 minutes. It's a free initiative. It's already been adopted by over 12,000 schools in 80 countries, which is around 3 million children. The Daily Mile is an excellent tool that can complement health and wellbeing programmes by increasing physical activity in the school day. And I think in the inequalities part, we know if some children aren't provided this opportunity within or surrounding the school day, they may not be presented with that opportunity at all. From the success of the school-based programme, Scotland announced its ambition to become the first Daily Mile nation by broadening the delivery of the Daily Mile within a school setting to a range of settings, creating the ability to impact across generations, which is where we link in with the active school run. So I know there's a lot of information in this slide, but as the Daily Mile has grown, so has our understanding of the initiative, and researchers across the world have begun to study the impact of how it improves children's health and well-being. I think some of the latest research is potentially the most important, particularly during COVID times. So the latest research concludes that the Daily Mile can help rebuild social relationships, and it also concluded that as peer-to-peer, child-to-child, as well as child-to-teacher, which, coming out of lockdown and a lot of people being in isolation is hugely important, and it being in that outdoor space, a safe space, and it being quite a natural conversation. There's also research to show that it can help impact on the ever-increasing inequalities gap. So Imperial College London have done a wide piece of research over the past year, and they'll continue to do the research over a 5-year period so that we have a longer look at it. And the Daily Mile is a wide-reaching intervention, reaching both high and low-performing schools. So just in terms of a strategic context around it and where it sits, so the Daily Mile has been around for several years, and as Stuart alluded to, it was born in Scotland. The Scottish Government have renewed their commitment around this, and to support this renewed commitment, we've created a strategy. The Daily Mile strategy supports the National Performance Framework, the Act of Scotland's Outcomes Framework, as well as the National Walking Strategy. Partnerships and integrations will be critical to success in helping to translate the support at a strategy and policy level to on-the-ground delivery, which is potentially the most important part. So strategy was created in partnership with Scottish Government, but also in consultation with delivery partners, which is based on a collaborative approach using partnerships with existing programmes and organisations. The strategy really isn't overly complicated. It has two very clear and simple objectives. One is increasing the number of primary and nursery age children participating during that curriculum time, and then to increase the number of young people and adults out with the school gates. The evidence and data show us that physical activity levels were on the decline for some children, a 7% decrease in physical activity, and the inequality gap is growing, and COVID-19 has had a negative effect on both of those things. One of the beauties of the Daily Mile is its simplicity, and it can be implemented and it's accessible to all. We know from the evidence that for physical activity increase, we need action on multiple fronts, which is why extending the Daily Mile from the curriculum time out with that is really important to becoming a Daily Mile nation. It's essential that we use partnerships and integration into already establishing programmes to ensure it's scalable, sustainable, and ultimately does have an impact on physical activity. So how can we achieve the ambition of becoming a Daily Mile nation, and how can we encourage people to be active daily? There is real momentum at the minute, but as Lee alluded to in her presentation, that we can't be complacent about that, and we need to continue to support people to be active. But it does create an excellent platform for us to encourage everyday activity to be part of new behaviour patterns. Encouraging and creating simple opportunities to increase everyday activity can be done through joined up working with delivery partners and local authorities, which I think is key. We've been working with Greater Manchester, who has an ambition to have 75% of its citizens active, mainly through walking strategies by 2023. We've created some toolkits with them. There's 3 of them, one for individuals and families, one for groups and organisations, and one for employers in the workplace. There's a consultation process that included consulting with the people that would actually use these toolkits. And 3 key themes came through. It needs to be simple, achievable, and sustainable. The Daily Mile in Greater Manchester's viewpoint, they wanted to create something to break down barriers, to encourage inactive to active, and break up sedentary time, and most importantly, provide people with a positive experience with physical activity. So Greater Manchester have just started to roll out these toolkits, and whilst it's too early to say if they've had an impact, the initial response is very positive. So our work with Living Streets over the past 6 months, in particular the last couple of months, as schools have come back, has been great in introducing the Daily Mail in a different context. With the journey to school, the Daily Mail is familiar for a lot of families, so it made sense to try and join up some key messaging and some simple messaging. Getting more opportunities to be outdoor and be active every day is key. As we know, positive experiences at a young age will help shape habits for life, which is why developing and supporting young people now is so important for the future. School is a perfect opportunity to increase physical activity, and the Daily Mail Foundation, Living Streets Scotland, Pass for All and Craigie worked in calling for families to reclaim the joy of everyday movement on the school journey, as well as all the physical benefits it has. It's a brilliant opportunity for people to speak to their kids and understand how their day's gone in an informal environment. There's also a clear link with the school-based programme during curriculum time and active travel. Active travel is more fun when you're fit enough to enjoy it. St Ninians Primary, where the Daily Mail started, by Elaine Wiley, one of her observations was due to the lack of increased sedentary time and, as we've spoken about, the lack of play, that children weren't fit enough to travel actively and for it to be an enjoyable experience. Through implementing the Daily Mail during the curriculum time, they also increased how they got to active travel through how they got to school trips. So they walked from their primary to the train station, which was around 1.5 miles, round Edinburgh for the Edinburgh Fringe, back to the train station and home again. Absolutely no complaints from the children. Whilst they got home tired, they were fit and able to do it. So as I mentioned several times through this presentation, partnerships are critical, particularly with the wider Daily Mail remit. When developing the strategy, the consultation was key, and we knew to achieve a Daily Mail nation, we couldn't be doing this in isolation. A collective approach is much more powerful and much more likely to lead to more positive and more permanent outcomes. Engaging at all levels is key, but most importantly, I think enthusiastic and committed local delivery. Working to include the Daily Mail to be part of wider strategies and local and national level will ensure sustainability and a wide-reaching impact. And finally, and Leah and I didn't have a conversation about her start happiness and me ending it, but I do think that there is a simple message around this, and it's encapsulated here around in whatever context, that being more active and it being a choice and being simple really does bring that happiness aspect to it. So in summary, I think there's a real opportunity to build on the positive habits that some people are demonstrating, and also to support these to continue in the longer term. And I think there's also an opportunity to support those inactive to become more active. I know from my sister-in-law, who is a head teacher at a school in a really deprived area, one of the things she noticed with children coming back to school was that some of them hadn't left some of their flats and high-rises from the 2nd of December until they came back to school. So the school time, the time surrounding school is really important in providing children the opportunity to do that. So thanks for listening, everyone, and I look forward to your questions, thoughts that you may have.
Okay, thank you, Fiona. That was an excellent overview, and really digging into the importance of physical activity to children. And we've done well in Scotland with that initiative. The question is how do we build on that? I'm going to have a look at the questions and see what we've got, if anybody's asked anything yet. And I've asked the speakers to put their cameras on. And we have Peter Monk, and it's a question about how will streets have to change to meet the 78% reduction target for the UK and Manchester. I think it's a slightly different target in Scotland at the moment. I'm not sure who has the best target these days, but it's good to see there's a bit of competition. And I think the question is also alluding to the fact that how can we make those changes kind of inclusive? And I suppose that doesn't involve younger people as well in terms of the types of spaces we're creating. Okay, does anybody want to start off with that in terms of streets changing, I think?
I can throw my tuppence worth in. I'm sure there's better people than me to answer this question, but it feels to me like the political will is there for we've got low emission zones, we've got renewed conversations around 20 mile an hour zones, you know, we've got the ability for local authorities to try new stuff with spaces for people. We've got Glasgow closing all sorts of streets, and other cities all over Scotland closing streets and trying new things in order to do this. But legislation only goes so far, and then there's the behaviour change aspect that needs to accompany it, and that's where here comes in. And those two things, I think, unless they run in parallel with each other, mean that we're going to be in trouble.
And I think there's a related question just on this theme from Stuart McMillan, Vice NFB UK and West of Scotland, and he's asking about things like e-scooters and all those sort of things that we could be seeing on the streets. Does anybody have views about how those are likely to cause problems? How we can control them?
Could get into a whole thing there, couldn't we, on e-scooters? But more generally, just on the sort of on the provision of streets for people again, and the fact that there are already many pressures on streets in terms of, if you look at street clutter, and you alluded earlier in the street audits that we do, there are a lot of pressures already. We need to go very clearly in one direction, which is more space for people, not less. And that needs to be, I think the other question that was also on the chat there was about the hierarchy for pedestrians. Pedestrians are at the top of that hierarchy, and that just needs underlining at every possible opportunity. So whether we're looking at the space available on the current footway, or whether we're going a bit further and saying, what can you do about the rest of this carriageway area, these other 7 or 8 of tarmac, it needs to be all the time with the hierarchy of pedestrians at the top.
I think there was actually a question about putting, I think it's just kind of covered on that from Ian McCall at Paths for All, asking about putting walking at the top of the pecking order in terms of the national national transport strategy. And Lee, I don't know if you have views on how far we've got to go on that.
Well, it's one thing, isn't it? Scotland is incredible at writing the policy and saying the right things. Like, that is the reason that I'm in this post, because I'm just so blown away with our intention, our political intention. But it's that gap that still exists between that and behaviour change that is still, I mean, Ian Finlay was always saying, Lee, it's moving faster than it ever has at any other time in history. Hang in there. So that gap is closing. It is happening faster. But I wasn't around. Ian was in it for years and years and saw that. So I draw some hope from the fact that he says that gap is closing between our policy and what we're delivering on the ground. But there is still that gap, and it's going to take it's going to be a multifaceted approach to making sure that everybody is on board and that the tipping point all happens at the same time.
Fiona, what's your views in terms of how optimistic are you that this is kind of building momentum in terms of what you're doing?
I think the momentum is building, and I think that there's a commitment there. The part for me is how we sustain it as well. So as we return, whatever looks like, that we can sustain some of these behaviours. You know, we've seen pockets, we've seen sort of peaks and troughs of all of this, and it does kind of come back to that behaviour change element, and how do we maintain that. And it all comes back down to, think, simplicity. The simpler we keep things, then the ability that people have to maintain them. So building routines around an active school run, and that, you know, it's not workplace by 9 o'clock, because that's where it starts to get a bit more complicated. So there's a kind of lifestyle change part of that. But from the work that we've seen with Living Streets, there's definitely been an increase in people actively travelling to school. There's been an increased commitment from schools around physical activity being an important part of it. I guess there's just a lot of priorities for schools at the minute, so it's just for us to continue the conversation to make sure that physical activity in whatever way, shape or form continues to be a priority for them.
So that's good. I mean, there's some optimism, I think, on the schools side of things. I'm waiting for some more questions to come in. There's one I'm going to get to, but quick question for Lee. In terms of I think we're making progress on the school side of things and school streets, but where are things at in terms of the wider engagement of young people in this, and the more informal side of things, and giving them a platform within all this? There's lots of policy in there, but I'm not coming across young people taking control of streets.
Yeah, absolutely. No, neither am I yet. But again, that is moving. There's some really good work being done around the National Transport Strategy, where initially the consultation around it was all stakeholder based and all Scottish Government staff based, and just with a little flag saying, actually, this isn't community consultation here. These are stakeholders that you're consulting that already have a vested interest. Where is the random sample? Where are our young people? Where are people that have disabilities? And so it's one thing to consult in the mobility and access community and then it's one thing to actually go out there and offer this platform for people that wouldn't otherwise put their hand up because they've got a vested interest. So that establishment of that citizen panel at that level is giving me such hope that really embedded right into the heart of this our national transport policy is this procedure. And we need to make sure that continues to happen. Like that report that Cycling Scotland just produced on bikeability was brilliant. It was a lovely piece of co-creation. So there's the extraction of information from young people that I think we need to move away from, and there's the co-creation with those young people and delivering that, not using our voices to interpret what it is that they say, but the delivering of that to the people that are actually physically out there shaping their communities. That's what needs to happen, and that is taking a while to understand, because we use words like naive and not why, but I think it is changing. I hope it is changing, and there's everybody on this conference are going to help change that.
I mean, I think there's a fair point here in that if you actually look at what adults have done to the streets, it's not children that have messed them up. So we've not exactly come up with a lot of good solutions over the years. So actually that idea of just, there isn't that much to lose in terms of what people see. Chris, I don't know if you have any view. We've done some work with high school students.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's a couple of questions that have popped up there related to that, and one that actually gives a good example of where we can intervene in a very positive way is with anti-idling. Obviously, pavement parking is another thing entirely with the bill where it is, and that's a question of enforcement. But looking at enforcement and what you can do and how pupils can be actively involved in that process is really important. One of the programs we have at the moment in the Northeast is to get the pupils to take on board that sort of, empower them to the fumes outside the school are very much, directed at them, and trying to give them the information they need, then let them take it forward, because we're not suggesting sort of, street battles with the motorists here, but it's a case of it needs the power needs to be in their hands so that they can take this on, and also raising the bar as well, because one of the things I encounter when we go in and speak to school travel groups is that children have heard so much for so long about the importance of giving that space over to the cars, to the buses, to everything that's passing by, that it's almost an entrenched sort of view already that we have to overcome. And whilst the children are creative and imaginative and really will tell us, they're almost holding back a little bit because they feel, well, we can't say that because that's not a safe thing to do, or that's not the right thing to do. So that for us is a really important place to be in the conversation, to say, look, we're listening. Let's redress that. Tell us exactly what you think should happen, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, I'm going to pick up on one of the questions that have come in, and this is about naughty adults and the need for enforcement, and whether we see a little bit more of that and where that fits in with it. But it's been pointed out that a lot of the problems are around about parking around about school gates and just generally behaving in a vehicle in a way that's totally inappropriate in terms of health and safety of children and other parents. There's areas that don't views on that one.
It's really interesting. I would tell you what local authority I was speaking to that were practicing these school streets closure stuff, but I was speaking to an official trying to make this happen. And he told me that he thought there was this is anecdotal, but he was sure that there was a direct correlation between the size of the vehicle and how likely a driver was to adhere to the school rules. So that's interesting if you want to believe that anecdotal evidence. I just think that's quite interesting.
There's an interesting study there, probably, Lee, isn't there? But
yeah, if anybody wants some research funding, Living Streets are up for it.
I was going to say though, I mean, it does with the discussion we were leading earlier on school streets, and that is part of the picture. It's not necessarily the only solution out there. I think that's very clear to state now. Certainly our local authorities will know that. It's a case of looking at each school individually, and it may be appropriate to take a school streets approach. It may be appropriate to introduce other measures like an active travel zone or better enforcement of what's there. There are lots of ways of tackling this, but I think enforcement remains an issue, and it's one that's not really dealt with.
Chris, can you explain what an active travel zone is?
I can do. Thank you for that. That's very neatly done. An active travel zone. I mean, it's something we've developed with a number of schools as a kind of stepping stone, if you like, because obviously school streets is a big thing. There is a process there that can take quite a bit of time. It involves traffic orders and such like. But on the way to that, schools can put a toe in the water and experiment with an exclusion zone, which is nothing more than writing. But it's interesting. We've seen results that are somewhere between a normal street and a street as it is, and a street where it would be with school streets. And what it's saying is it's a communications only activity, and the school set out an area they want to see parents not parking in and being respectful about, then communicate that with leaflets and assemblies and such like. And yeah, it does yield results, and it's a good stepping stone, a place, on the way to a school street.
Excellent. I've got a couple of questions about home working and the changes we had over the last year. And obviously the schools have been off and on, and it's difficult to know what's happening. But is there views on, is this a good thing, bad thing? Does it make our life easier in terms of helping parents manage school run? I'll pass to Fiona for that one first up.
I think it probably gives everyone a bit more balance, doesn't it? You're not running out the door first thing in the morning, and rushing home at night. So if people had a balance of 2 to 3 days in the office and 2 to 3 days at home, it still provides opportunity for a bit more time and space to encourage that. I think as well, Lee touched on during her presentation about giving children independence and responsibility where it's safe to do so, and that's a good thing, not a bad thing. So there's certainly an element of that. You come into the infrastructure issues around that and safety, but there are a lot of places where children could quite easily walk to school, and again, it opens up those social opportunities for children to chat to each other. So there's so many positive things about it. It's how we keep the messaging to parents clear and consistent. And we talk about active travel in this forum, but to simplify that, you're just letting your kids walk to school, which is what generations have done, and they've survived. It's not been a for us. So I think just simplifying the language around that. But from everyone I'm hearing and speaking to, I'm not sure there is going to be a return to office 5 days a week. Maybe some that's not possible to do so. So hopefully we will see an increase due to that, and it's another barrier taken down for busy parents.
And I think this is an interesting area that we need to look at, this whole life and how it fits within. Back to that slide I put up right at the start about the behavioural elements of the social norms and what people perceive. And I know from my experience that if I send my daughter to a breakfast club, she's not allowed to play in the playground because they're there to supervise it. Now, the same days she actually goes over herself, walks over herself because it's only a 5-minute walk, and is in the playground with her friends. So there's lots of things like that we're not unpicking here. And I just want to acknowledge there's a question there about perception of safety around about schools, which I think is very important. And I think school streets aren't unsafe, but rightly people perceive them as unsafe because of what they feel like. And I think that a lot of this is about feel of the streets, and seeing more kids and less cars is the key here. The fact that you feel you have to supervise your kids in these spaces means that means they're not safe because they need adults to supervise them. So it's the measure of this, I think, is a street where you can actually have a degree of freedom to children. I've just about running out of time, but I want to acknowledge another question, which I think is this is from Wendy Shaw at Kiln Kilgrove O'Dell Trust, about actually planning in city areas for new high mid-rise buildings without green space, and the lack of and that being an issue. And I think the things there that shouldn't be happening, and I think that is changing in the planning regulations. But it'll take and the other side is, if that is the case, that makes it all the more important to create these other spaces and reclaim parts of the street for children. So I'm sorry we didn't get quite a chance to put those questions to the panel, because I'm going to wrap up to give everybody a well-earned break to get a cup of tea. But do use the networking facilities on the platform. So I'm going to close the session and say a big thank you to all the speakers for their contribution. It's a really interesting discussion, and we'll be back again at about 11:30, where the next session will be chaired by Mary Craigie. Okay, bye.